I would never lie to you boys. You know it. And you know that I absolutely love what's currently happening with Bethesda. Things are the worst that they have ever been. Currently, we live in an age where not even one day passes where someone with 1 million subscribers is not dropping a video about how bad every decision that Bethesda has done in the last 15 years minimum has absolutely been. Because Bethesda is completely a shadow of it once was. And don't be sad by it. A lot of people are like, well, Bethesda once was a company that was liked, they did good, and they actually pushed forward innovation. That is true. But we cannot live in the past. Time has moved forward, and especially for Bethesda, they're nothing from the past. It's not even the word modern day Bethesda doesn't really apply. It's just what Bethesda is nowadays. There's no old Bethesda and there's no new Bethesda. It's just what it is currently, and it is what it is, and it's really bad. Do not feel sad for them, by the way. Most people at Bethesda are currently people who would laugh, be happy about your problems, your pitfalls and downfalls, and they would make probably fun of you if they could. They do not deserve any of you or my sympathy. They are simply not good people, and it shows. And man, whenever something bad happens to them, I get pretty excited, I'm not gonna lie. And now we have an ex-big wig at Bethesda just literally speaking out of what's happening in the company, which is kinda insane. It just gets worse and worse for them.
Pete Hines. Yes, remember in like 2014, this dude would rip a tweet and we'd just start speculating our brains out on if it meant anything for Fallout 4. And then I'd kind of talk about that in a video and I put his face on a ketchup bottle because I still like to do a little trolling even nowadays. But ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about that Pete Hines. For those who don't know who this is the former senior vice president of marketing and communications at Bethesda. He was a Bethesda lifer, there for 24 years through all the highs and lows of Bethesda since the very beginning. Pete Hines also famously had an email leaked in 2022 seemingly annoyed with Xbox and how they were handling exclusivity for Activision and Blizzard versus how Bethesda was told they'd be handling their games. And shortly thereafter, Pete Hines would leave Xbox despite being so firmly dedicated to Bethesda. Since then, he's been enjoying the retirement lifestyle, but I always had a feeling Pete would step out of hiding. When he talked, it would create a very important conversation. And indeed, it has, because this is a two-parter. We're talking about part one, how Bethesda has changed. Part two, how Game Pass is affecting developers. That latter topic may sound familiar.
Again, not a single 3-day span goes by when someone doesn't say, Game Pass is really successful, guys. Don't worry about it. Game Pass. Surely, yes, it's so successful you need to remind us every week that it's super successful. I mean, I believe you. I believe you so much. Truly. Okay? And I know there's going to be some people who are a little bit more astute and they're going to say, well, in the Microsoft quarterly earnings report or whatever earnings report they're looking, it actually says that Game Pass is doing pretty well. Dude, I have written reports like that have been used in publicly traded companies and in government. I know exactly how to make those numbers look good. I know exactly how to, in completely legitimate ways, make Game Pass the most profitable thing on paper in existence. You can combine so many things. And there's no actual designation how you need to call them, which is even more funnier, honestly. You know? You can call umbrella sales Game Pass sales if you want, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. It's an art. It's an art form, boys. Trust me. And that's why I fully am certain that Game Pass is not doing good.
And it's because we recently covered a gamesindustry.biz article in a video talking about gaming's grave mistakes catching up with the industry. And it's there we highlighted comments from the likes of Sean Layden and Matt Piscatella of Circana assessing what exactly is doing well in the market, but also how certain new models like the subscription model can have a negative impact on both developers and gamers long term. Since then, even recent former studio heads of Microsoft Studios, might I add, have chimed in on what Pete Hines had to say about Game Pass. So it's a two-parter. I want to start off with kind of establishing the familial vibe, because I think also the Game Pass topic builds well off of that when you know what Bethesda was versus what they're being told to be, but also to kind of get into what Bethesda as a company was at one point and what even someone who was a Bethesda lifer viewed as their kind of golden era.
By the way, a lot of the people who defend Xbox and things like Fallout have no idea about any of these things. For example, when we're talking about disasters, people are saying, "Oh yeah, but Doom Eternal did good." No, no. Doom Eternal was a complete financial failure. It is a financial flop. Doom Eternal underperformed on every financial metric that there is. They probably have not made money off of Doom Eternal until this point even. It's and people mention things like Doom Eternal. This is just how lackluster people's understanding of what actually is profitable and what isn't really is. Doom Eternal's numbers seem fine on the surface if you don't understand what these numbers represent. Okay? There's no way that you make a sequel to a successful game and that sequel gets half as many sales as the previous one, and you're saying, "Oh yeah, that's real good. That's real good." No, people just don't understand what successful actually means. Successful and financially successful are completely two different things, by the way, in a lot of cases. Something can actually do really good really good perceived sales-wise from a player's perspective, but can actually fail financially, fiscally, because the budget for its creation was way bigger than the previous one. Okay, a great example of this is, imagine a game that that costed 300 million to make, and it sold, I don't know, 7 million copies month one. That is a success. By most metrics, that would be a success. Break even plus profit. And the next game, it costs 500 million to make, and it sells 7.5 million copies first month. Technically, bigger numbers, bigger better, but does an increase of only 500,000 players actually warrant that 200 million increase in the budget? No, of course not. And this is what people often do not actually think about when talking about these subjects.
Who was a Bethesda lifer viewed as their kind of golden era. From there, we'll transition to the Game Pass. No doubt it's going to be a chunky video, so let's not delay any further. If you're new here and you're into, Xbox, PlayStation, Bethesda, a lot of cool cats in this video getting featured.
By the way, did not pre-watch this video. Whenever I pre-watch a video and I react to it, which does happen like once in 2 or 3 months, honestly, I always say it. It's just every time you talk about Bethesda, it's impossible to not mention Game Pass. It's literally a meme at this point.
Consider subscribing. So the article comes from...
Also, like the video, because reasons.
Double Tap. It's titled 24 Years at Bethesda with Pete Hines. There's no question that the company is not the same. Now, some parts of this article I am going to paraphrase because I think it's a great read, but also the...
Hey, the rich life was not... The rich life has not been the same for a while since Epstein's Island got shut down. You know what I'm saying? It has not been the same for the rich folk. It is what it is.
Video would become too bloated if I sit here and read literally everything. It opens up with Pete Hines talking about the company that he belonged to. He was reminiscing about the good old days, and in particular, he was talking about shipping Morrowind. You see, Bethesda was a very light and nimble company and privately owned, so they just kind of operated on what they thought made sense for them and their business at the time. And a lot of Bethesda employees fondly remember this time with the company, and a lot of ex-employees that have spoken to me at Bethesda have shared that similar feeling of like, yeah, it's changed a lot, which is why I left. Like, that's a common statement I've heard from at least 3 former developers at Bethesda. And I'm talking Bethesda as a whole, by the way, not just Bethesda Game Studios, because people cross those wires a lot. But Pete talks about making the manual for Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, and we've featured that on Retro Rebound in the Complete in Box experience, and that manual kicks ass. I love the Complete in Box experience for Elder Scrolls games because Bethesda would always pack a map in there. They did it with Skyrim, they did it with Oblivion, they did it with Morrowind. It's awesome, but he kind of got thrown into that job, and that's what a lot of these small businesses do. Like, you just wear multiple hats, and there's this sort of personal investment. It's special to you. It's not
Boys, never use skooma, okay? It is what it is.
always about the dollars and cents. I guess the best word to
This is you on 2,000 bottles of skooma.
use for it is it's a human operation, not just a money-making operation. Examples of this are mentioned in the article, such as Pete Hines being concussed during a soccer match, where obviously if you're concussed, you probably want to avoid bright lights. But then he went out to a press event and, you have to show off video games there. A lot of bright lights, a lot of flashing stuff. So probably not a pretty trip for him, but like that's the type of dedication that a lot of Bethesda lifers were showing. That's because, as described in the article, it was, quote, Robert Altman's company and we were his employees, no question. One of the most interesting quotes is that he says, there's just no question that the company is not the same. It has been radically changed and altered from the company that we built. It is what it is. Things change, things move on. But at its height, it was a really special thing to be part of. And given the period of time that Pete really reminisces on.
True. Again, old Bethesda was Rockstar, the same way that Blizzard was, the same way Ubisoft was, BioWare. All these companies that we make fun of today used to be bigger than life almost.
On throughout a lot of this article, as we'll get into with some studio acquisitions by Bethesda, it seems his feeling of that golden era is a similar window to how we view it, like those early 2000s days to probably Fallout 4. Not that the guy hated being there through the tough times of 76 or shipping Starfield, but there's no denying Bethesda has changed a lot.
My biggest regret is the fact that Microsoft bought Bethesda and they delayed Starfield's launch by roughly 2 years. Because Bethesda was ready to ship Starfield 2 years ago before it was actually shipped. Can you imagine how fucking ass Starfield would have been? I mean, Starfield's already a completely shallow game. Again, if anyone wants to challenge me and tell me of a good mechanic in Starfield, I'm all ears. Because I have thought about this a lot. I legitimately think there is not a single mechanic in Starfield, not a single experience in Starfield that you can tell me, and I will agree that it's actually at least decent. Everything in Starfield is bad. And the bugs. Starfield was pretty buggy when it launched. It was definitely not Bethesda's most buggy game, but again, it's a AAA company, now with a literal trillion-dollar company backing it. Multi-trillion-dollar company, in fact. And it was still buggy. And Bethesda wanted to release Starfield 2 years before. Imagine the glory. Imagine how absolutely amazing that experience would be. It would be probably a rival to Fallout 76. If not worse. And 76 was a disaster. It's a disaster with the capital D and next 3 letters, okay? It's that bad.
In fact, I covered this in a video a few months ago on how a lot of Bethesda has changed. We talked about what Nate Perkypile said about how Bethesda had changed. A lot of ex-Bethesda devs, Bruce Nesmith, hey, Bethesda's changed. And tech companies do change. That does happen. But as we'll get into, as this topic kind of molds into the Game Pass part of things, we'll see how the content strategy is a big part of how Bethesda changed. But also, they themselves, when it was still Robert Altman's company before he sadly passed away in 2021, underwent a lot of change in the late 2010s. This is when they greenlit a lot of live service projects and walked away from their sort of single-player, first-person DNA that defined them for so many of us. And they went on to make the likes of Fallout 76, Youngblood. They went on to make Redfall. And that's because they were chasing that live service trend, as I've talked about many times. But Bethesda bought companies the way that I think many of us hope acquisitions are typically done, which is a natural relationship is formed and then you purchase that company. It's very different from how Xbox, I think, is rightfully accused of straight up buying IP to compete. And especially when you see the recent story from Jason.
Why would anyone accuse them of that? It makes sense to do it. Like, why are people mad about that? It just makes sense.
Trier of how Perfect Dark almost got sold off to Take-Two, but because they couldn't decide.
God, Perfect Dark. Perfect Dark, by the way, is probably still happening. But Perfect Dark is such a shit show. Holy. I mean, look at this. That chin can break diamonds. That chin is gonna destroy any door in front of the manager. Like, Perfect Karen is Xbox's future. I love it.
What to do with the IP, the deal got canceled.
And we still have Fable. Fable is still not canceled, which I think is still very likely to happen, honestly. And I say very likely, I mean like 30% chance of it happening, but that's extremely high of a chance of getting canceled.
What happens is now I'm very upset with Xbox because they buy these IP and they're like, no, we're not going to sell them off. I'm like, what are you going to do with Perfect Dark, bro? It's just going to sit in the vault for the rest. I can put all of my money on it. They will never touch Perfect Dark again. I would not be surprised at all if we go like 2 more decades with literally 0 Perfect.
By the way, this is all fake. This is not gameplay. This is pre-rendered stuff.
Dark content. But Bethesda did the right thing because, as highlighted in this article here, Pete talks about how when they worked with Arcane, when they worked with Tango Gameworks, when they worked with Machine Games, there was a mutual admiration, but also a similar DNA. It's why I fell in love with a lot of these developers as well. Like, I started off as a Bethesda Game Studios fan, but I found out about Arcane and Dishonored because they were doing similar systems and immersive elements that I really appreciated in Bethesda games that I now found somewhere else. Same thing with Machine Games.
We talk about Dishonored a little bit here, but the reality is Dishonored's fucked, if you did not know. I would like to remind everyone, Dishonored 1 was a good and fun game, but Dishonored 2 exists and that's a shit pile. There you go.
Games. Like, that's how I got pulled into their games and picked up Wolfenstein: The New Order. There was a shared DNA, but Pete goes on to say how they respected what id did, Machine Games, Arcane, and how they want to do more together. And so naturally that partnership is formed and then they buy them. The other thing Bethesda was able to do when they were privately owned was really control how to market their things in interesting ways. And the most iconic moment of all of them is, of course, Fallout 4, where it completely changed the industry standards, right? We saw how so many games were being announced and it would be a year or 2 before they came out. Here comes Bethesda with a highly rumored, heavily leaked title, and everyone's thinking, oh, they're finally showing it, it'll be out in 2 years, but it ends up coming out 6 months later. No delays, nothing. Like, exactly what you wanted from them. But he also highlights here how he was told Skyrim couldn't go against Call of Duty, and we know how popular Skyrim is to this day. You couldn't release Oblivion in May because games shouldn't come out in the spring, but we know now a lot of games come out in the spring. Bethesda operated on their own.
This is why I call marketing a joke. I firmly believe that it's almost every piece of almost. Marketing does work sometimes, but when it works, you can tell. Even a blind man can tell when marketing works. But most of the time, when I have seen evidence of marketing working statistically, it all can just be attributed to luck. That's it. Marketing is such bullshit.
Own terms, for better or for worse. We'll get into the worst part in a moment here, but they operate on their own terms and they've made positive impacts in when games can be released and how they can be released.
Oh, by the way, I think marketing is going to collapse. Well, I mean, this is not even a hot take. Anyone remember the Jaguar ad? Cracker Battle? Oh, I cannot. YouTube, I'm joking. It's a different battle. The store, you know, the one with the Vogue CEO, that one. There's a marketing is gonna extremely self-implode because marketing is something that, if you did not know, by the way, is always favoring young people to work in it. If you're a marketing employee, you probably know or have heard of the fact that, you know, if you're 40, it's really tough to actually get a new job in the marketing in a marketing position, department, or whatever, because they just simply favor young people. The younger, the better. Like, you know, 18-year-old fresh out of college, 15 piercings, and that living an alternative boogaloo lifestyle. Hell yeah, that's our boy. And I mean, this is how we get the Jaguar ads. This is how we get so many of those absolute woke disaster ads. And it's gonna get worse because we're currently at the point where a lot of people who were competent in marketing are now like 40, 50 and getting replaced by these young Zoomers who literally made the Jaguar ad. We are never, for the next 10 years, minimum, we are never gonna see Sylvester Stallone doing a pirouette between two moving trucks, okay? We are never seeing good marketing in the next 10 years. It is impossible. It is gonna be functionally, absolutely impossible.
All the way down to, hey, even recently, the Hi-Fi Rush Shadow Drop. But of course, there's like the blemish of Fallout 76, and Pete Hines does mention this as his like #1 regret in the terms of the canvas bag situation. He highlights a battle between price tag with the finance people in the company, but at the same time being a literal canvas shortage. And he highlights that his biggest failing was not pushing immediately.
Dude, the canvas shortage was not a real thing, by the way. That was the lie Bethesda used to say, oh no, we couldn't actually make the canvas bag because there's a canvas shortage, yes. A canvas shortage, surely. It was a lie, Maddie. You drank the Kool-Aid.
For making and sending one to everybody that actually wanted one.
By the way, but this was a massive controversy because this is literally a bait and switch. Like, they say you're gonna get this, and in reality, you get like a fucking McDonald's paper bag with a paper straw in it. This was an absolute disaster, which is hilarious because that's what Bethesda is now best known for.
Ultimately, he highlights it as the dumbest thing he ever did at Bethesda. So yeah, we see the transformation here. He's not the first to identify things are different. Companies do change over time, but when you're absorbed by a corporation like Microsoft, things change. And look, I admit my naivety. I've talked about it when they were first acquired because it felt like a natural partnership, right? We knew, hey, Morrowind was Xbox exclusive, Oblivion was Xbox exclusive. Bethesda got away from themselves, started to chase the live service bag. Xbox would serve as a stabilizing kind of force for them. And again, Bethesda's not a stranger to the Xbox exclusive, where it felt like Bethesda could get back to being Bethesda. Starfield would be this Xbox exclusive. Things would work out really well for Bethesda Game Studios proper and the companies attached to it, like an Arcane, would have more time to polish. And obviously we know dead wrong about that, right? A lot of the executives and heads of these teams that would define what Bethesda once was would be gone outside of Todd Howard, and the entire game release strategy would completely transform. But also, you'd have to start putting your games on Game Pass. So here's what Pete Hines said, and let's start the second part of this conversation. He says, I'm not working in any of these companies anymore, and so I don't assume that everything I knew while I was in the industry still holds true today, Hines said. At the same time, I'm involved enough to know I saw what I consider to be some short-sighted decision-making several years ago, and it seems to be bearing out the way I said. Subscriptions have become the new four-letter word, right? You can't buy a product anymore. When you talk about a subscription that relies on content, if you don't figure out how to balance the needs of the service and the people running the service with the people who are providing the content, without which your subscription is worth jack shit, then you have a real problem.
God, it's actually a long time since I have talked about how bad Game Pass is, but the reality is, okay, I'll give you the short version, because it's been truly a while since we have talked about Game Pass. Maybe you're new here. If you're new here, by the way, subscribe, like the video, comment. But Game Pass is a ripoff. Let me explain why. The average person does not play that many games per year. And the price of Game Pass is roughly 3 to 4 now. 3 to 4, maybe if the prices go a bit more, then it's going to be, well, 3 still minimum. AAA releases. That's how expensive Game Pass is in a year. And your deal for getting Game Pass is really bad. Because I did not know this initially. My opinion of Game Pass was already dreadful, but when I found out this, someone commented, by the way. So, you commenting is very valuable because I do not own the console. I do not know the inner smallest details about Game Pass, but when someone commented this is like a jaw drop moment for me of how absolutely insanely unprofitable and bad for a consumer Game Pass is. Because here's the trick. Game Pass actually removes shit from Game Pass. You want to play some game that just came out? It's on Game Pass. Wow, such value. Okay. First of all, again, you need to play a minimum of 4 to 5 games per year, a long time, and then Game Pass is at least somewhat valuable to you. Otherwise, you're just losing money. The whole point of Game Pass is that people are going to subscribe, and then they're going to forget that they subscribed, and they're not going to just cancel it because canceling is a hustle, because America literally shot down America literally, by the way, shot down easy cancellation. Because every cancellation is like a hustle. You need to click on this, then you need to like it's chore. And America shut it down. And the easy cancellation is literally like, okay, I want to cancel my subscription. Here's a button that says cancel subscription. You click it and then you press yes, and you have fucking canceled your subscription. America was against that, by the way. They shut it down in America. Very cool, by the way. So Game Pass literally just wants you to keep being subscribed and not do anything. That's what it wants. And the thing is, if you even find a game that you want to play and it's day one on Game Pass, this is the insidious part of Game Pass. This is what truly makes it completely well, not good for consumers. It's the fact that they're probably going to pull that game from Game Pass after 6 months. So if in a year you want to actually play that game again, you have to now buy it. Because it's not on Game Pass anymore. Turns out they pull shit from Game Pass. That's what they do. That's half of their business model. Game Pass exists, so, and by the way, I'm pretty sure if someone actually got the data from it, that it would be like this. Extremely popular game on Game Pass. Everyone plays it. A year later, it gets removed from Game Pass, so the people need to buy it now outright and stuff like that. Because that is money otherwise left on the table if they don't use a strategy like this. So that's the insidious part of Game Pass. In the long term, not only is it inefficient because the average person just does not play that many games a year, it is the fact that the game that you want to play is going to get removed from it, and you're going to have to buy it anyway, while still being on the Game Pass subscription. That makes Game Pass ridiculously bad for consumers. It's insane.
Problem. You need to properly acknowledge, compensate, and recognize what it takes to create that content and not just make a game, but make a product. That tension is hurting a lot of people, including the content creators themselves, because they're fitting into an ecosystem that is not properly valuing and rewarding what they are making. Now, this is not the first time that Pete Hines has had an issue with how Xbox does business, and I imagine he was probably one of the people in the room when they were about to sell off to Xbox going, hang on, I don't know about this one, because we see here in a leaked email during the FTC court case that Pete Hines was talking with some of the peeps at Bethesda, including Mr. Todd Howard himself, saying that, I'm confused, is the below not the opposite of what we were just told to do with our own titles? What's the difference? Emphasis in bold is mine from the blog post yesterday, and it says, we have committed to Sony that we will make them available, being Call of Duty, on PlayStation beyond the existing agreement and in the future, so that Sony fans can continue to enjoy the games they love. We are also interested in taking similar steps to support Nintendo's successful business. Continuing on, Pete says at the bottom, did anyone at Xbox think about giving us a heads up on this? Todd's going to DICE in a couple of weeks. You don't think a journal might find him and press him on why the below is okay for COD or any Activision Blizzard games, but not Elder Scrolls 6 or Starfield, or at any/every future interview he does. It's not a surprise that, about a year or so later, Pete Hines was out. See you later. Now, what Pete Hines has said here, again, will sound familiar because Sean Layden was echoing a similar sentiment. Now, Sean got involved immediately, and for those unfamiliar, Sean Layden was one of the big execs during the launch of the PlayStation 4 and one of the key minds responsible for a lot of PlayStation success before he was seemingly, although unconfirmed, forced out of PlayStation for the likes of Jim Ryan, which is unbelievable.
Oh, I did not know that.
But yeah, he chimes in on social media saying that Pete nailed it. He goes a step further and posts on his LinkedIn saying, I'm just going to leave this here. I believe Pete's colorful quote hits this nail right on the head. The question is not, is the service profitable for the platform? Is it healthy and helpful?
Oh god, the LinkedIn. Dude, LinkedIn is becoming such an absolute annoying thing because it's It's a place where essentially all the self-thought sniffers are going to, because the only reason to be on LinkedIn is if you have a really good-looking resume and you're willing to and you're looking to hire a secretary that does extra work, if you know what I'm saying, which is very based. And Bobby Kotick is an absolute G, if you know the stories that I'm referring to here, boys. In any case, as Bobby would absolutely the stewardess for goodbye, we have to say thank you, Maddie, for this video. Love it. 10 out of 10. That was Mr. Maddie Plays. Bye.